Hello, all listeners, and welcome to this episode of Hacker Talk. My name is Philip, and I will be your host during today's show. Today, I have the pleasure to introduce Sam Bent. Sam has a background as being a Darknet vendor, an individual selling various substances on several Darknet marketplaces. A Darknet marketplace, in this context, is an online store similar to eBay, prioritizing its users' anonymity by utilizing protocols such as Tor or I2P. I'm really looking forward to hearing how Sam utilized operation security in his day-to-day life in a scenario where you don't know who you can trust and where everyone is acting under a pseudonym. Welcome to Hacker Talk, Sam Bent. How are you doing today, Sam?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on.
So, for all of listeners that have no idea of who you are and what your background is, take us down memory lane. Who are you?
My name's Sam. I have a YouTube channel called Doing Fed Time, and on there I primarily talk about the darknet. And my background in the darknet is fairly extensive. I was a darknet vendor. I was also a darknet admin. I primarily focused when I was a darknet admin on things like dispute resolution or adjudication, where like a vendor and a buyer would have a disagreement, and I would come in to solve that, or doing public relations for them on sites like Reddit and things like that. And I was also a administrator on Dread, which is one of the Darknet's largest forums.
What was your first introduction to Tor? What sparked your interest for it?
Uh, it's so it's been a long journey. I remember when I first ran Tor, I have no clue when that actually was. But like I remember checking out, Silkroad when it came up. So that you can establish a timeline with that. It's been a while. I
Yeah.
remember like looking at Bitcoin when it was worth a fraction of a penny, and my buddy had taught me. He showed me mining, and we mined something like 300, 400 Bitcoin, and I was like, "This is useless." And I just deleted the wallet. I was like,
Shit.
this is stupid. So I deleted the wallet and walked away. They had sites. I mean, then like later on, you had sites that came to be like BTC Faucet, where you could go to BTC Faucet and basically, get 10, 20 free Bitcoin every day because it wasn't worth anything. I mean, the first Bitcoin transaction ever was like 20,000 Bitcoin for two pizzas, right? So,
Mhm.
it really wasn't a thing. So it's
Have
just
you read
it's been
that?
an interesting journey.
Have you read that Bitcoin talk, Fred, about the
The
guy,
what?
the Bitcoin talk, Fred, about the guy buying pizzas for 20,000 Bitcoins?
From my understanding, that was the first transaction of Bitcoin ever. But
Yeah,
I mean, who actually knows? It could be anything.
yeah. They have like a public, sorry for interrupting. They have a public like they have a thread on Bitcoin talk about that incident or that happened, and it's funny to see how it evolved during the years because
Hmm.
the first 4 years everyone is like, "This is awesome. This is the best thing for Bitcoin adoption." And then as the price goes over and over, you can see like as newer the replies gets, the angrier and angrier more people are.
Yeah, and then
It's
you
like,
you end up, yeah, and you see a lot of people that were just like, I mean, for years, years and years and years. I remember like after it really started, I think it was like $30 a coin. That's when I realized, all right, yeah, this isn't just a joke. It's not just some trendy thing or some nonsense. Then you start to analyze it and you start to understand, the structure of it and where the inherent value is that everyone else says it's valuable. Like if you have two or more people that agree on the value of something, it kind of has this inherent value. So, like, I could take a regular piece of paper off my desk right now and say, I, Sam Ben, give you $20,000 and I'll pay it on this day. And I sign it and date it and I give it to you. And, now essentially that piece of paper is worth $20,000. I mean, you lose it and you can't take me to court to get that money. So, we just turn that, that debt into something of value. We turn that piece of paper into something worth 20 grand. And you kind of had that fruition of something that was, didn't even really have a price tag on it being worth, something going, all the way up to like whatever it was, 50 grand, and then it goes back down and people freak out. I remember when it hit 19,000 and it was like there for 3 days and people freaked out, and then it dropped and they're like, oh, it's crashing, it's crashing. I'm like, yeah, but it's going to go back up. That's the nature of it. That's what it is. It's always going to go back up. And it's just a matter of how much time will there be before it goes back up, because there's so many different people who, they've been trapped by these different financial institutions for so long now that any semblance of freedom, and it's like people are like, oh, we have KYC and I have to identify with my face, and like, you really don't. Though if you're resourceful enough, you can find places that have no KYC. And like, from my understanding of KYC, when I was looking at like my money laundering charges with KYC, the people who are mandated to do that, it's not me and you, right? Like if I'm going to sell you $500 in Bitcoin, like I'm not obligated to get your identity. Like private sales are legal, you know? And that's like really like, that's a lot of, that still gives us a lot of freedom. So I think you still have people out there who are always going to want to operate on that level, because we have an inherent right to privacy. And even with all the social media and all the stuff that we have nowadays, it's something that if you want it, you can fight in the form of learning to be able to ascertain it. Nothing's free. And fighting for that ability to have privacy, that's something you're going to have to invest some time into learning how to do in order to be able to do it.
Absolutely, it's not easy. It's not easy dealing with the cryptocurrency. So how did you get introduced to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and how did that go on to develop to more Tor things?
Yeah, so I started watching it probably when it was about $200, and I think that was on Silkroad. And like I was still watching Silkroad, and I was like, man, this place is a scam. It's all a bunch of feds
Yeah.
run this probably. you know, I wasn't interested in selling drugs at the time. I was in information security, IT, stuff like that. I had like my own little business where I would do like a lot of residential security stuff. So like, I really disliked the fact that I would have people in my community who would get price gouged on things by like computer stores, or like, you would have like the Best Buy team, and like they rake people over the coals because people don't know how much work goes into swapping our RAM, which is, it's a joke. And like, so they rake people over the coals. Oh, it's gonna be a couple days to replace this RAM. Like, dude, it's gonna be 5 minutes. Like take two screws out, stick it in. Like, what's the issue? So like I created this company to be able to give people like affordable, reliable computer service where like they can have reasonably priced services. And I introduced stuff like remote desktop, which is like with TeamViewer, which is really nice because saves me on gas. They can get that support instantly, but it's one guy doing it. So did my best, but you're making $50 at a time doing it by yourself, trying to learn about accounting and learning how to manage your LLC and all this other. And ended up being too much.
All the forms and the legal
Yeah,
paperwork and
yeah.
the
And
invoices.
so what really killed it though was I ended up moving. So I moved from
Uh-huh.
one place to another, but like when I moved, the neighborhood that I moved to, it was very nice. It was in a town called East Burke here in Vermont, and it was gorgeous. It was like, so anyone with Google Maps, it was 3585 Darling Hill Road, and like if you look at that house, it's up on top of a mountain, and like you can see mountain ranges all around you. Like it's absolutely gorgeous. But I moved there. I was so amped to move in there, and I got it for like that whole house. I ended up renting for $1,100 a month. So I was amped because it's
Wow,
like a 4 or 5 bedroom. I was souped
that's
about
a
that.
that's a nice
Yeah,
deal.
we're talking like 2015. So it wasn't bad. So I ended up moving there. I moved in, and I just so being in like information technology, I think, and being on the internet, basically 24/7, right? I think we get to the point where it's like, only third world countries don't have the internet. So, but that was my misconception. That was my ignorance. So when I moved to this place, I realized there's no wired internet. I just assumed it would be there. So like when
Mm-hmm.
I called the when I called the cable company, they're like, nah, we don't service that area. And I'm like, all right, what do I have to do to service the area? They're like, oh, you gotta get a petition signed by so many people on the street. And like, it's a like again, it's a really affluent neighborhood. Like I got this moonshiner beard, I got a shaved head. I'm like, I'm not walking up to these houses with these people who multi-million dollar houses. So I was like, they don't think I'm there to rob the place. So I was like, ask like a whatever. So I ended up, trying to figure something else out. And that time that it took to do that, it killed my business.
Wow.
So, from there, it was like, what do I do now? And figuring that out, along with like breaking up with the woman I was with. Like I ended up breaking up with her. We were together for 10 years, but I broke up with her
Oh, that
and,
sucks.
getting ready to leave, it was like, when I left, I wanted to leave and I wanted to move into a house, but I didn't want to like go to a crappy town that was full of drug addicts because I didn't want like I grew up in southeast, so like I didn't want my kids to be around that drug scene,
Yeah.
see crackheads and dope fiends and all that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
The needles and yeah.
Right, so I was like, what can I do to make money quickly? And like I totally, irony isn't lost on me, so I ended up going over and saying, well, a natural conversion for a guy that's in IT and security, um, is not a natural conversion, but like a pretty easy transition was going to be a darknet vendor. I already know about encryption. I understand networks. I understand all these things. Randomizing MAC addresses. Like all these kind of different concepts that are going to come into play in regards to Opsec, forming those policies, forming those like information security policies, all those different things that come into play. Being able to line those up like dominoes for someone who's dealt with security and been a consultant and help people secure their own lands and then secure themselves out there on the internet, you already have a heads up. And like for someone who's studied I was running backtrack too, like so like having been in that and like owning boxes and VMs 10 years ago,
I
yeah.
found a fun side thought on the backtrack. I found a backtrack VM that was created 2011,
Yep.
and I actually used that for verifying that I've been in IT security for long.
That's crazy though. But like, so like, coming from that kind of background, it was kind of a natural thing to adapt to. The only addition was the drugs. But like I'd sold weed and stuff before, powder coke, stuff like that prior to getting into the security scene. So it was kind of like a mesh of these two jobs that I had previously. They were just combined. Like I totally get the irony of like, oh, you sold drugs to get a better house, so your kids didn't have to be around drug addicts. Like, and obviously, that completely backfired on me. But yeah. So the like the going into that, setting it all up was absolutely insane because like it's not even like the encryption stuff that or like the technical stuff. Like did you randomize your Mac when you hopped on to your neighbor's Wi-Fi to hop onto Tor? Like not even that stuff so much because like that stuff you get to a point where it's just second nature, but it's like all the kind of extras, little things like did you make sure that before you went into the room where you're packaging your packages today that you sanitized it with bleach because 20% of dust is dead skin cells, which is DNA.
Hmm.
So that's an OPSEC problem for you. Like if you're a slob, don't be a darknet vendor. Like,
Learn how to clean first.
and that's like aside from not obviously not having your prints on the inside of boxes, like you have plausible deniability for the outside of them. If you're grabbing a bunch of boxes from USPS, you can explain why you're fingerprints on the outside of them, but on the inside of them, or like, on the plastic, that's, you can't really justify that. So all those kinds of, little things, they add up, and you end up having just this ridiculous list of things in your head that you have to manage and micromanage in order to make sure that everything's set. And, trying to do all that and like still grow cannabis, answer customers' questions, stay active on the forums so you can be relevant, like all of those kind of things. Really, I mean, it's absolutely insane to try to balance all that and, raise 3 children at the same time, trying to make sure like that our world is completely separate from them. Like, they see me on the laptop, but that's all they know,
Mm-hmm.
like dad works on computers, like, and in my
Yeah.
DEF CON talk, that's what, when the Department of Homeland Security investigated me, that's what they knew. They knew that I was in the computer business, but that's all they knew. Like if you go through that talk, you'll see there's one slide that's all white, and that's what it says at the top was, and that's kind of the difference you have between OPSEC and cover. Like with OPSEC, you don't employ deception, whereas with cover, you can absolutely employ whatever deception you want. That was my deception because I already owned a computer company, so it's
Mm-hmm.
very it's easy to fake it because what to say, how to carry yourself, and all that.
You're already there, so to say.
Yep.
How did you? Okay, so you decide like, okay, now I'm basically need to create good OPSEC, and I need to figure out how to become anonymous on the internet. Like, how was the start of it? Did you make like a giant checklist and just check things off?
So
Uh,
what ended up happening was the good thing about this was that the 10 years before before I decided to become a vendor, for
mhm.
10 years before that, I had studied, information security, operational security, and all those kind of things that go into it. Obviously, I hadn't studied them in the context of being a darknet vendor, but um, you know, a vulnerability is a vulnerability is a vulnerability. Same with an exploit. So, understanding that and being able to put yourself in the shoes of an attacker, it's kind of like when you leave your house and you accidentally leave your keys in your house. Now, prior to you doing that, you always thought like, oh, I'm safe, all my stuff's safe, I'm good. You don't worry every day about someone breaking in and tying you up, right? I mean, it's not a
Yeah.
realistic thing to worry about a home invasion on a regular basis, or to worry about getting robbed on a regular basis. And that's because like security is one of those essential things that we as human beings, along with food, shelter, water, we need to survive. So we feel safe in our homes, and then we walk out of our homes and we leave our keys in our home, and it's like, oh, like the first thing I always think of is like, shit, man, like how am I going to get back in now? And then about 2 seconds goes by, and I check the windows, I try to card my door, and within
Hmm.
3 minutes I've got access to my home, and then I walk around after getting in and I make sure all the windows are locked, you know and all that's set up. So like, but my point is, you have this feeling of security until it gets obliterated, and that could be you forgetting your keys in your house, or it could be like, you grabbed the wrong torrent, like you're gonna pirate that game and you grabbed that wrong torrent and you got owned. Like,
Yeah, you downloaded the wrong file and now you have ransomware.
so like you just, that's how it was. And like, again, whether it's like, you're grabbing wares and you grab the wrong thing, some douchebag put in, a rat, and now you get owned. You got to reformat and reset up and change all your creds for everything. But when that happens, you learn a lot. And if you don't learn a lot, you're just going to get kicked in the teeth again. And it's kind of the same with any security, whether it's physical, digital, and like having been kicked in the face a bunch of times, you kind of already know what to expect. So you're going from
Yep.
like one hostile environment to another. It'd be like going to prison and then going to a halfway house. Like, if your average person went directly to a halfway house, it'd be like, wow, this really sucks. There's some psychos that live here. But like going to prison first, you're not going to think that. It's going to be a lot calmer than what it was. So like going from one hostile environment to another, it's kind of natural. It's just like that different environment has different variables, so you adapt to them. It's like anything else. So like, I always like to say one of the best things to do is to know who you are. So like, whether that's like going to 16personalities.com and taking a personality test and like seeing who you are, and like it'll like you go there, you read the results and it freaks you out because they're telling you about you. Like I remember going there, taking it, and they're talking about how like you get lost in thought because like I'm an INTPA, so like I'm logic driven, but like I get lost in thought and I'll work. And it's like when you play a video game and 5 hours goes by and you could have swore it was 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's like that with me when I'm working. So
Ah.
it's absolutely insane. But getting back to it, like learning who you are, whether it's your personality type or learning who you are as far as adaptability. And I think as far as adaptability goes, like some of the best people, my opinion, that are in cybersecurity or IT or any of these kind of fields with this stuff is those people who are highly adaptable. Like I don't care if you have a college degree, I don't care if you got a Cisco cert or your CCEN, whatever. Like at the end of the day, none of that
CCNA.
matters. It's
Yeah.
it's about how adaptable you are. And like they have a test called the AQ test. It's adversity quotient, and it ranges from like 0 to 200 or something like that. And like you could take that and you can see literally where you measure on a level of adaptability as a human being. And for me, I think the coolest thing about that test is that like I think adaptability is right there, connected hand in hand with survivability, right? Like if I stick you in a new environment and you can't survive, that means you're limited to one environment and you can never leave it. It's like, I can only be in Windows and I can't ever use any other OS. Like it's just it's not going to be good for you. But if like, you can be on like BSD and then hop on Ubuntu and then, transfer over to Windows and then you're on a Mac, like you have this fluidity that, a lot of people don't have, and it makes it a lot easier to kind of operate. And I think that's key to survival and really thriving is the ability to go into any environment and not only survive, but thrive in that environment. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was as successful as I was, is because that ability to kind of become a chameleon and be able to make it in any place that I go to. I know like that probably way overkill for the question you asked. I definitely tend to go off on tangents.
No, no,
Again,
I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome. So something I'm pretty interested in hearing about as well is like your view on keeping track on multiple identities. How
mhm.
was your approach on that? Did you have like 10 or X amount of multiple online identities that you continuously
Yeah.
maintained, so to say?
Yeah. I don't even know how many it was. I know that like if you look at that talk at DEF CON from the slides that I have, I know that I have two different slides. And I think the pictures are different. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But they list, some of the identities that I had. And, there's a lot. So yeah, definitely. And what's crazy about that is, like for your listeners that don't really know too much about PGP, I'm not going to, get into a whole tutorial, but like with PGP, you basically have a public key and a private key. And like I can send you my public key, you can type something and then use my public key to encrypt that message and send it to me, and then I can decrypt it. But another thing that I can do is I can write a message and I can do what's called signing that message. So I could say, "Hi, this is Sam." And then I can sign that message with my private PGP key, which no one else has. And when you have my public key, you can look at that message, you can, put it into a program, and you can validate that it was my private key that was used to sign that message. So it lets you know that, I'm the original owner of that key. I'm the one who has access to that private key, and I signed it. It doesn't guarantee you that you're talking to me, because if I got raided or something like that, it could be, a federal agent who has it. But it gives you at least some kind of assurance. So if you're on a different site and someone's like, oh, hey, it's Too Happy Times 2 or doing Fed Time, it's like, yeah, like, all right, send us a signed message and prove it. And like, if that person has my public key, they can validate that much. So with that, what's really crazy about the darknet when you get into it and you really get into like the subculture, it gets to a point where like things like that, like different identities, typically you would think you use them independently, right? Like, you might have a vendor identity and a buyer identity, and that's true. But you also have a history of identities that you can use. So, like, if you created a darknet site that was like, I don't know, ABC Market, I come and I'm like, hey, I'd like to work for you. In a PM as like, you're the darknet market admin. I'm saying, hey man, I'd like to work for you. Here's my resume. And now my resume is me saying, hi, this is Too Happy Times, but I've signed it in, different I've signed it and dated it inside of 4 or 5 different messages. And each message is signed with a different PGP key for a different market admin. So what that does is it lets you know, all right, this guy, and you can verify it, this guy has worked on 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 darknet markets, and this is his resume. And like that's how a resume looks like on the darknet. So like to answer your question, like you do hold on to them. I think my favorite way to do it was with KeePass X, because it's at least you have some encryption, and it's all local. So it's like my favorite password manager now is Bitwarden by far, but back then it was KeePass X, and that was because it was all it's all local.
Why do you prefer Bitwarden now?
Because it's fluid. So like I can go from like my PC to my mobile and have all my creds.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's like it's in the cloud. So like no matter what device I'm on, or no matter where I am, I can always get access to my credentials.
Oh, I
Which I
think
mean, obviously, like you don't want to. I wouldn't do that as a darknet vendor. That would be really stupid Opsec to do. No matter how much you think the company is credible, like it's just something you don't do. So like I would much rather prefer like KeePass X, where I can keep it on a local
keep
flash
it
drive or
local
something.
and yeah,
Yep.
don't
Yep.
let it sync to some random provider.
Yeah, so like you might have it on a flash drive. So like when you boot up Tails, you can throw it in there, or like I had it on a flash drive and then on like an SD card, and then you take the
Oh,
SD. Yeah, you take the SD card. You have a copy of it, so you have a backup. You take that SD card and you take a flathead screwdriver, and with the flathead screwdriver, you go over and you create what's called a slip. And a slip is when you go over to a door hinge, you unscrew the screws, you lift up like one side of the hinge,
okay.
where it connects, and then you take that flathead screwdriver and you whack it a couple times, and it indents the wood good enough where you can stick in that SD card. You stick in the SD card, and then you put the hinge back, put the screws back, and now you have a safe. And like no one's gonna rob your house and look in your door hinges.
Oh shit. I never heard
You
that
know?
before.
Yeah, so it's called the slip. And
The
it's
slip.
something, as in security, right? We have that kind of a scale where on the far right side we have security, and on the far left side we have convenience. Like it might be super convenient for you to keep your passwords in a text file and to put all your passwords on, sticky pads on your monitor, and that's like super convenient for you. But like, it's really unsecure, right? Like it's horrible security. And then
Yeah.
on the other hand, you have the other extreme, and it's like, I'm going to take this flash drive, I'm going to encrypt it, and then I'm going to encase it in concrete and, bury it 50 feet in the ground. It's like, getting to that is going to be ridiculous. It's super secure, but like it's a ridiculous solution that's way overkill. So trying to find that balance between security and convenience is really at the end of the day what it's all about. And kind of the nice thing about the slip is that, you know, it kind of gives you the best of both worlds. It's relatively accessible, and it's very easy to make. Anyone with a door can make one. And it only takes a couple seconds. You use a screwdriver and something heavy to pound it with, you know.
That's awesome.
And I mean, nowadays you can get a SD card that's a terabyte. So I mean, you could back up a lot of stuff, you know. So having those two options where it's like, you know, if you get raided, you can pull out that flash drive and you know, beat it with a hammer, or you know, hit it with a blowtorch, or throw it in the microwave, or whatever it is you know your policy is for data destruction. You can do that. You know, they might raid you, and then, like, you know, at the end of the day, if you chose to go back to that, you have your backups. And you know, if they end up raiding you again, you can sue them for harassment. Like, all those kind of things. Like, when I created, my big thing was when I created my OPSEC, and when I looked at, you know, how I wanted to structure everything, I said, I want to set it up where, like, it's impossible to be 100% secure, right? Like, that's a logical fallacy. You know, no one's, you know, anyone ever tells you, oh, guaranteed you're not going to get hacked, like they're a moron. So, like, with that said, I wanted to be like, you know, if I do get busted, then what's my out? Like, how do I set it up where, like, even if they raid me and they catch me red-handed, I can still get out? How can I do that? And like, my solution was, well, make it so they have to break the law. Because if they have to break the law in order to catch me, you know, you can get those charges dismissed. And with the OPSEC that I set up as a darknet vendor, that was exactly what happened. I set it up to a point where they had to break the law in order to catch me. That was, you know, basically when you ship through USPS, you're shipping through the federal government, and the federal government requires a warrant to open your package. Like FedEx, UPS, DHL, they don't. They're private companies. They can open your shit, look at it. Nothing you can do about it. But, you know, having the federal government ship it, they can't. And they have to satisfy certain requirements, you know, as far as having reasonable suspicion and probable cause in order to even apply for a federal search warrant for your package. And like, if you understand how they define those things and how they can ascertain those abilities of, you know, being able to say this package is, you know, there's reasonable suspicion that this package is, you know, there's something illegal in it, or like being able to build on that to a point where they have probable cause.
So you want to
And
migrate away from all uncertainties and all red flags.
Right. So like, by understanding what they define and how they figure those things out, you know, you can engineer a plan where they never do, because you know what they're looking for. You know, like, if I know a network admin, all he does is, you know, maybe only thing he does is watch Wireshark, right? Like, he sits there all day and he just stares at Wireshark all day. Like, running Nmap would probably be stupid. You know, it's going to be a flag for him. So I'd find a different way. Maybe I drop a bunch of USB drives in the parking lot, you know, or, you know, something along those lines.
Yeah,
But like,
free
I'm going to
USBs
circumvent.
for everyone.
Right. Yeah. Like, whatever it is that he's looking for, like, I'm going to go and try to circumvent that. So in doing that, like, it worked. And the United States Postal Inspector, you know, he opened this package and he opened it illegally. He didn't have a warrant to do it. And he opened it and he found drugs. And then when they're like, oh, we found drugs. And then they used that package to apply for a federal search warrant for my home.
Why
So
did he open the package?
So I had the security policy that I had in place for my cousin, who shipped, like, her job was to ship packages. And in return, she got commission on whatever the ratio was for profit. So, like, you know, if I was selling an ounce of Coke in a, you know, and that's what was in the box, she got a percentage of the profit on that ounce of Coke. She also got a standard fee per box. And then, like, you know, all of her expenses were taken care of. So like, she didn't have to pay anything for rent. She didn't have to pay. She had, like, none of her bills or gas car paint,
She
all that
was
stuff.
your right hand, so to say.
Right, absolutely, yeah. So like all those things were taken care of. And in exchange, all her only responsibility was shipping packages. Like I coordinated the orders, I all like all that. So I talked to the customers, I made the listings, I did all of that stuff, packaged the packages, all that stuff, shipments, reorders, all that. And then she shipped them out. And what ended up happening, again, going back to our scale there with complacency on one side, security on the other. She moved from the security side to the complacency side. How I had it set up was 3 packages would go out at every post office and no more, because the return addresses were for a given town or city. So like you could look at 3 boxes and they would say town A, right, on the return address. And then the next 3 packages would be town B, town C. So it's like this is the order. You
How
just
did
drive to these towns.
you manage the return addresses?
Yeah. So one of the flags USPS in general looks for is, fake addresses, whether it's shipping to a fake address or a fake return address. So like all those things are flags. And if people are like, oh, well, they deliver a bunch of packages, how would they know? I suggest like that individual goes on to USPS.com and signs up for informed delivery. And what you'll see is before your mail comes every day, they'll email you pictures of your mail. Like they know what you're getting, and they document what you're getting, So using a fake return or to address is foolish. These people deliver your mail every day. They know who you are. So like if I get stuff every day and it's under Sam Ben, and then all of a sudden I order some drugs in the darknet and it's like, I don't know, John's son. Like they're gonna be like, who the hell is John's son? Like there's no John's son that lives here. So it's like it's not something that might cause them they still don't have the authority to open the box in that case, but you don't want to draw any attention whatsoever. And that's something that can do that. So, it's a red flag. And like, that postal worker, not all postal workers are honest. He might steal your package, so it's that kind of stuff. So like for me, I had to find a way to have legitimate return addresses that wouldn't go back to like the guy who was working a construction job or the accountant or like any of these citizens, any of these people who were working honest 9 to 5s, just trying to make it. And like I'm no different. I was, just trying to live, like the job I'm doing is illegal, but that's what it is. We're all just trying to survive. We're trying to make it to the end of the day, trying to provide for our family. So like I didn't want to screw someone over in me trying to do my job and put them in a bad situation where now they have to, now they're gonna have to deal with feds coming to their house, like, where's the coke at? Like, or something like that. So I wanted to like find a list of people who I thought were deserving of being screwed over. And it took me a while because that's kind of a big challenge. Like find a list of people who you think are scumbags and you don't mind if you screw them over. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And there has to be someone in every town that there's a post office in. And like, for me, I ended up, my solution was in the sex offender registry. And that worked out great for me, because I was like, I'm going to go in and, the worst ones, these level 3 sex offenders, those are the guys I'm going to go for first. If there's one sex offender in the town and, he's like a level, like the least level, like, dude, sorry, you're getting hit, like I'm still going to use your stuff, and if I ever I never ran across one, but like if I had ever had a town that had no sex offenders in it, I just wouldn't have shipped from it, because I'm not, put someone who's just trying to make it, through that drudgery, of having to deal with the feds. Because at the end of the day, like if that average person is surveilled, there's a great Harvard study that says your average person, like not criminal, like they follow all the laws, like your average person commits 1 to 3 felonies a day.
3 felonies a day.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's because, so if you think about it like this, at the end of the day, a lawyer, right,
Yeah.
goes to law school for like what, 7 years, and they by the end of it they specialize in something. So maybe they specialize in criminal justice, they specialize in intellectual property rights, or they specialize in corporate law, or they specialize in international law, or they specialize in all these different selective fields within law. So like they study for 7 years, and after 7 years of study, they specialize in one section of law. Now, like you look at even something, like US tax code. I could build a small house with the amount of books that they have, that it just fills the tomes and tomes of information on just tax law alone. So for your average person who hasn't even spent 7 years studying law, never mind just studied law on this, like you're never going to know all the laws that exist, so you can never not break those laws. So
Yeah.
essentially, if the feds
That's
want
beautiful.
you, all they have to do is watch you for a little bit.
Mhm.
And here's the thing, even if they watch you and you don't commit a crime, they can assign a crime to you. So there was a lady who I read a case on, and her boyfriend sold drugs. Now, she didn't know he sold drugs. They had met, they were going out for a little bit, and like he went to take a shower and the phone rang, and he he yelled out from the shower, "Hey babe, can you answer that?" She's like, "Oh yeah, sure." So she picks it up, and whatever the names are, like, she picks up the name, and it's like, "Oh, hi, is Matt there?" And then she's like, "Oh no, he's taking a shower." And the dude on the other end, "Oh, tell him John called," or whatever the guy's name was. She's like, "Oh, okay." So like she hangs up, and she tells her boyfriend, "Oh, like John called." And he's like, "Okay." So like years later, this guy gets busted, and like they end up snatching up everybody, including the guy that called. And the guy that called was like, "Oh, like I called," and like his girlfriend answered. So they figured out who the girlfriend was, and then they went and they questioned her, like, "Oh, like, do you know this guy?" She's like, "Yeah, I went out with him." They're like, "Okay," and they end up arresting her, and they gave her a conspiracy charge because she answered the phone and told her boyfriend that someone called. She was compliant in a criminal conspiracy, um, and they sentenced her to 10 years. So
That's
the federal government has a 99% conviction rate. If like if I'm a boxer and I have a 99%
they
win
have a
ratio.
99% conviction rate.
Yep. Yeah, it used to be 97, but it's went up.
Jesus Christ.
Like that, it's basically like when you go to court with the feds, it's like sitting down to play chess with someone, and they're like, "Hey, I just want to let you know, all my pawns are queens." Like if you got a problem with that, like, well, too bad,
Yeah.
because if you have a problem with that, you can just admit your guilt now and do whatever time I want to give you. But like, you have people that go into it. Like when I went into it, I had a 10 count indictment. So going into it, I look up each charge, whether it was money
Mhm.
laundering, possession with intent, or conspiracy. I look up each charge and I see each charge carries a maximum of a 20-year sentence. And like, in order to get that maximum, like you have to be like a career criminal, and just like you have to be, you have to have like really done some crazy shit and like repeatedly been arrested, but I didn't know
Mhm.
that. I had never dealt with the feds. So I'm like, okay, 20, my worst case scenario, right? 20 years, 10 years, I got 10 charges at 20 years apiece. It's 200 years in prison. So, it's a death sentence. So
Yeah.
like, your options
That's
are
a long
like
wait.
tell on someone or, take that hit, and for me, I like telling on someone for me was never an option. Like, it's not who I am. It's not how I'm built. It's not something that I could do. Like what I did is what I did. And being a man, like, I accept responsibility for what I did. I think that's, for me, that's the right way to handle it. And that's what I did. So like, but looking at like numbers like that, when you're thinking 200 years, and then you go in and they're like, "Hey, listen, we'll give you a maximum of 108 months, which is 9 years." Like 9 years in prison. If I told you, "Hey man, you good to do 9 years in prison right now?" You're like, hell no, hell no. I don't want to go to federal prison for basically 10 years, dude. That's a wicked long time. That's crazy. But like when you've been sitting there stewing for a year and a half, 2 years, 5 years, waiting for this bullet to come, 10 years is not that long. And that's one of the tactics that they use. So anyways, how it worked out in my case was I had what was called a Franks hearing. And a Franks hearing is really, really difficult to get. But a Franks hearing is when you can prove law enforcement broke the law in order to catch you. Now, it's really hard to get because you're not an investigative agency. Like you don't, as hackers, we have the ability to do OSINT, stuff like that, right? But like
Exactly.
doing full-on investigations is a little bit different. So like a lot of people, your average person, it's not something that you really they have the availability to do. It's either going to take a lot of intelligence and resources, or it's going to take a lot of money. And that's kind of the thing between the two. But because of how I structured my business model, I had that baked into there. So we had the United States Postal Inspector, signing off on opening these packages and then, using it to apply for a search warrant. So everything that happened after that, all the drugs they found, all that kind of stuff, we could get tossed out. We had to go to this Franks hearing, and basically every charge, all my 10 count indictment was dead because they screwed up going into it. They violated the law in order to catch me, which was the design of my Opsec. So I was like, oh, this is fucking beautiful, man. Because sorry. But I was like, this is beautiful because it's working out exactly how I planned it.
The plan is playing out. That's
so I was like, this is great. And I'm like, this is why we set up, security systems and have contingency plans and incident response. And, it's for these things. Obviously, those things are typically made in totally different environments. But
yes,
irregardless, that's what they're there for. So my lawyer talked to the United States attorney, and the United States attorney said, hey, listen, like I really don't want to go to this Franks hearing tomorrow. And I'm thinking, I'm like, I bet you don't. You're gonna get owned, dude. Like, so he's like, I really don't want to go to this Franks hearing, tomorrow. He was like, listen, like, I'll offer you a maximum of 108 months. And at that point, I'm like, man, like screw this guy. You know what I mean? Like we're about to own you.
Like we've been gone so far.
Yeah, why would I possibly sign a plea agreement and willingly take, a decade? So I asked my lawyer this, and she was like, well, he said, he was like, listen, like, you'll get all the counts dismissed, but you won't get the initial count, the first count of conspiracy dismissed. And so like, it's just me and my cousin. And when we got raided, an agreement I made before we got raided was if we get raided, I'll tell the feds, like I'm a darknet vendor and all the drugs in the house are mine. I'll accept responsibility because by doing that, it limits who it's going to affect. It's damage control. So like I'm already, obviously the feds are raiding, right? We already got a severe security issue to begin with. And I'm in charge of security. So if I screwed up, I'm the one who takes the hit. So, that was our agreement. So when the feds came in, I was like, listen, I'm a darknet vendor. All the drugs that are in the safe are mine. And they're like, oh, what the hell? Like really blew their minds.
So the feds come and knocking and they don't know that you're a darknet dealer. They're just
they had suspicions of it. Because they had been so after they illegally opened the package, they had been trailing my cousin, following her. And when they came to the house, they knew the house. So they knew where I lived and all that stuff. And that's why, like, if you look at in the DEF CON talk where I show like the Department of Homeland Security document, it says like their investigation. They're like, oh, we asked about Sam Ben at the local post office, and they said that Sam Ben, he works with computers. He owns a computer company. So that's what they thought I did. Originally they thought that my cousin was the darknet vendor. because my Opsec was so tight that none of my stuff was out there. None of her stuff was out there. So our Opsec policy was we ship 3 packages from each post office. We don't return to that post office for 6 months. That way, if we we ship out packages from post office A, and the postal inspector tells the feds come there to surveil it, right? We won't be back for 6 months. The feds aren't going to sit around for 6 months waiting for us to come back. So we'd spiral out, and we would just hit these random post offices to move packages, out. And she would do 3 packages each post office, and she would know how many to do and where to do them, because that information was on the return label on the package. Like, you can't screw it up. You know what I'm saying? So what she would end up doing is she got complacent, and she would go into a post office with 12 packages. Now, with those 12 packages, every 3 packages have one address, 3 packages have another. So she's walking in there with 3-4 different return addresses.
Oh, that's a red flag there.
Yeah. Right. Now, what's funny is that's not enough for a probable cause. It's reasonable suspicion, but he didn't have, that's why I say, like, he didn't have the ability to have reasonable suspicion, which is why he didn't apply for the search warrant. That's why he just opened it up anyways. You see what I'm saying now?
Okay. Now I get it. Yeah.
So, but because he did that, he screwed himself over, because now everything they found after that and all my statements are now out the window. My saying I'm a darknet vendor, it was me, it was only me. That's out. Everything they found is out, which was my plan. So this next part
wasn't such a microphone drop right there.
So one thing that wasn't part of my plan, though, and this is where he dropped the mic, is he said, listen, I don't want to go to this Frank's hearing. And I was like, I'm like laughing, he's like, I have a plea deal to offer you. It's 108 months. So he said, I talked to my lawyer. I'm like, screw this guy. Like, I can't wait to go to this here. I'm going to be smiling the whole time, And she was like, listen, did you read your PSR? So when you catch a federal case, they have this thing called a PSR. And the PSR is basically it's your life story. Like, if you had pneumonia as a kid, that'll probably be in there. Any prior cases you had, your family history, like any abuse, neglect, injuries, all that kind of stuff is documented in the PSR. And they use your entire life to decide your sentence, in part to decide your sentence. Also, there's your charges and all that stuff. But so this is how they make this decision, is with a PSR. So she was like, oh, did you read your PSR? And I was like, yeah, I skimmed through it, but it's my life, like it's my, any charge, like my possession charges that I caught, all this other stuff. I know what's in it. Like, I skimmed through it, but it's everything that's happened in my life. Like, why do I need to read about myself? And she's like, oh, did you read page 15? And I was like, I don't think so. And she's like, yeah, you might want to go read your PSR then. Because an idiot, I didn't know how serious that document was. So I went back and I read it. Now, prior to me telling you what I saw in it, what happened was, after I got indicted, the United States attorney contacted me and through my lawyer and basically said, hey, listen, we'd like you to come in and give us a proffer. So my lawyer told me this, and I was like, what's a proffer? Like, I'd never heard of that. And she's like, well, a proffer is like me and you go to the United States attorney, and you sit down with them and you tell them, who you did business with, what their names are, where you ship to, what you know about who, if you have account numbers of people, or whatever about your illegal business and anyone that was involved in it, you tell them all that. And I was like, man, that kind of sounds like snitching to me, and she was like, we don't call it that. We don't call it that. I was like, listen, lady, I worked with cartels. They would, like I got I got 3 kids, like my whole family. Are you nuts? Like I'm good. I'll go to prison for 200 years. At least I know, they're not gonna murder my kids. Yeah, I'm set. And not only that, like I did what I did, so I'll eat that. Um,
Hmm.
so anyway, so she's like going back, fast forward. She's like, go read your PSR. So I'm like, all right. So I go through, get to page 15, and on page 15, my cousin's name is Geneva. So I get to page 15, and it says Geneva Benz proffer, and I was like,
Okay.
oh, you bitch, because the whole
Oh.
time that I was under indictment, she had been living with me. So like the feds took all our money, they took everything. So like I had to go out, like get a legit 9 to 5, obviously, and work. And like,
Hmm.
I'm doing that. And, she's just doing whatever she wants. Like she's still not contributing. She's not paying rent. She's not moving out. But the whole time she was informing on me. So
Oh.
like it was, I had agreed to take the hit for everything before we
Hmm.
got raided. We got raided. I fulfilled my end of the bargain. I
Yeah.
admitted to everything so they wouldn't mess with her. And then, they ended up talking to her at some point, and obviously she talked to them back. And by her talking to them, she's openly admitting conspiracy. And when admit that you conspired to do something with another person, that person's automatically on the hook for conspiracy. So I could beat all 9 of the charges except for that one conspiracy count because she had already snitched on me. Now, what he had said was, I'll offer you 108 months. You sign for 108 months. I don't have to go to this Frank's hearing. And you'll be guaranteed that you don't get more than 108 months.
Okay.
Or you don't sign it. You fight it. We go to this Frank's hearing. You get some charges dismissed, and you're still going to get charged with conspiracy, which I can prove because I have documentation and witness statements from her, and corroboration from her. And I will go for a mandatory minimum of 10 years, which means there's no good time. There's none of that. There's no, in feds, there's no parole anyway. But like there's no good time, no none of that on a 10-year mandatory sentence, like you're doing that whole 10. So um I was that was when he dropped the mic. I was like, all right, yeah, like screw him out. I'll sign, and I ended up signing for it. And my judge, when he reviewed the case, he ended up reviewing it, and he ended up giving me 60 months in prison, which is 5 years instead of what the prosecutor was trying to get, which was 9.
And how long did you end up serving?
So I had went in and I got like the first thing I started doing when I got there was I realized, I got convicted with words, right? Like, a bunch of words built into something like, for a website is code. And when it executes correctly, it makes something, potentially worth a lot, right? Like, Zuckerberg building his website turns into Facebook, it's worth billions, right? So you have this inherent power in words, as like V would say from V from Vendetta. Um, um, is very hackerish thing to point out, but there's a power with words, and like seeing like how I got convicted through these words like legalese, where like they're using Black's Law Dictionary, not like
Hmm.
the Oxford Dictionary, so it's a totally different language, and how they're doing that, like I saw an inherent power in getting to know and understand the law. So I started studying it, and I became a paralegal while I was there. But like I got 5 years. So getting 5 years federally, you have to do 85% of your time. So it would have been like 4.5 years that I would have to do on that. But like I went in and I studied the law, and like I got to a point where after studying it for so long, I was like, you know what, like I'm good. I'm just gonna do my sentence, and whatever. And my wife was like, screw that, like file a motion, like fight for your freedom, like you can't just give up. So you know she encouraged me to fight for my freedom, and I ended up doing just that. I filed a 3582 motion, which is a compassionate release motion, and basically I said, I'm obese, I have high blood pressure, I'm a former cigarette smoker, I had asthma. So I'm at risk of catching and dying from COVID, according to the CDC. So, you know,
Hmm.
I told my judge, like, you gave me 5 years, you didn't give me a death sentence, you know? And the motion that I wrote was 200 pages. Now, when you're in like federal prison, there's so much bad stuff that happens that you get to a point where you don't believe anything good will happen, and it's a safe way to live. So like in writing this motion, I didn't expect to be free. I expected I'd file it, and I knew that the United States attorney would have to read whatever I wrote, and he'd have to write back to it. So I wrote, this 200-page motion, one, to piss him off because it's 200 pages, right? Like I'm sitting in prison. I don't have anything else to do. He's got a ton of stuff to do. So, let me write this massively long motion that he has to read but on top of that, there was a lot of precedent for me getting released. Like I said, like it wasn't a death sentence. It was a 5-year sentence. So I fought, and I fought very hard. And the United States attorney waited 4 months before responding to me. And when he responded, the majority of what he said was what they call background. And background is basically, Sam Bent did this. He was sentenced on this day. He's done this much time. It's just what's happened in the case. So he spent like 15, 16 pages talking about what's already happened. And then he spent 1 page saying why I shouldn't be released. And like one of those things was because like I had refused the COVID vaccine. And like, I responded back and I was like, I have an inherent right to have informed consent for anything medical related. So that means that I have the ability and I have the right to learn about a medical treatment or vaccine before I agree to take it. You can't forcibly vaccinate me, even though I'm in prison. And there was a paper that documented that I had never gotten the vaccine because the BOP came through one day and like everyone's getting the vaccine, or sign this paper and refuse it. And like, if I sign that paper, my argument to the court wouldn't have been as good because at that point I would have been vaccinated. Now, since then, a lot of data has come out about how, the vaccine doesn't prevent transmission. And, it's but that's a whole nother topic. I'm not going to get into that. But, so going back to that, I didn't want to take it because I didn't want to give them any ammunition to be able to use against me. So the ammunition that he did use was like, oh, look, you refused. Here's the paper. And like when my judge sentenced me, he was like, oh, you're a highly intelligent, person. I've never seen a crime like this, very unique. And he was like, I can't give you a probationary sentence. And a probationary sentence is like, you don't go to prison, you go to probation. And he's like, I can't give you a probationary sentence because no one's asked for that. So like when I got my transcripts and I read that, I was like, I could have been on probation instead. But like, I mean, I actually couldn't have because of my sentencing points. So I didn't really get what he was saying there. But he read it and he said, based on your 3553A factors, which is basically legal jargon for who you are, right? Are you a sociopath? Are you a repeat offender? Are you like, are you a drug addict? Are you, in my case, it was just like a guy who was trying to get his family's kids into a better position. So it wasn't like I wasn't selling drugs so I could buy a Lexus. I was doing it to try to get a nice place to live for my children, and like that matters federally. So like taking that into account, it was another reason why he ended up granting my motion. And it was really amazing to beat the United States attorney. Like this guy is obviously a very top lawyer. You know what I mean? And like I smashed him legally, of course.
Hmm.
I think that was really awesome. But it was like a brute force attack, right? Like a 200-page motion. I mean, to give you like a kind of a comparison, a lot of compassionate release motions are like 3, maybe 15 pages. Mine was
Hmm.
200.
Oh shit.
So it was a brute force attack, and like, yeah, he really, the United States attorney really does not like me because of that.
I like that mentality. That's a bit of the hacker mentality. We want to
Right.
do
So
the
yeah, I mean,
most.
I go from one like hostile environment, the
Mm-hmm.
dark net, to prison, which is another, again, hostile environment. Each one has its own unique rules, its own
Mm-hmm.
set of security, its own set of do's and don'ts, you know, and like and then you have the law, and that's a whole nother, again, whole nother thing. But it's like, you learn how, you learn HTML, then you move into CSS, and then maybe you move into something else like SQL or whatever. And all these different things kind of have their own, their own syntax, their own ways of doing things, and proper procedures, and all these different things, and taking all that into account is kind of, at the end of the day, what I try to do. And again, going back to the adaptability we were talking about, you know, you can
Mm-hmm.
survive building your own company. Can you survive, being a darknet vendor? Can you survive, being in federal prison? Can you survive, all these different things were just really interesting challenges. A lot of people, maybe like someone looking for a challenge, I'm gonna go try to climb a mountain, like do something like that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
as I said, different worldviews and needs at the time. So
Absolutely. Push in different directions. But how did it go from, so you go from just selling to being more active in these sites, taking
no,
on
it's the
a,
opposite.
oh, it was the opposite. So you
Yep. So
started more as a moderator, and
no. So
how
so I
did that
started.
go?
Yeah. So when I went on there, no one knows you, right? Like you're just a screen name.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no credibility. There's no nothing. Like you're just a random user. No one knows you. No one cares about you. A regular person. So like the question was like, how do I establish myself in a place where we're all anonymous? If I'm not ready to be a vendor yet, and I'm not a darknet buyer, how do I come into this anonymous place and establish credibility? And for me, it was do what I've always done, and that's try to help people out, teach people about security, teach people about Opsec, teach people about IT and best practices, and try to teach them how to keep themselves secure. Now, I had been used to doing it on a residential level, with individuals, locking down their routers, updating firmware on their routers, like, making sure that, they know to pick good passwords and, all these kind of different things, showing them how to see who's on their local area network to make sure that, no
Mm-hmm.
one's on their network that shouldn't be. So all those kind of best practices, installing, Next DNS or Kaspersky or whatever it was, to be able to try to keep them safe. Those preventative means are a lot better than actually having to respond to an incident. So all that kind of stuff was natural to me. So going into that realm, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go in and I'm going to be helpful. So that's what I did. I went in, and my first month on my first darknet forum, I made 4 or 5 thousand posts. I want to say it was 5,000 posts, and it was insane because it was like a 60-hour a week job where like that's what I did. I went and I just responded to everyone that made a post on that forum. And in a month's time, I went from nobody knowing me to the whole community knowing me. And you had people who hated me on there, but you had like a lot of people who had respect for me because they, like, someone would ask a question and they knew they were getting an answer. They knew it was reliable. And like if you hopped on there and tried to get people outside of the escrow system, like let's say pounds of cannabis are selling for 1,200, random number, like pounds of cannabis on that darknet market are averaging for like 1,200, right? And you have a scammer who hops on the forums and is like, hey man, like I got this pound for 600, DM me. And like what they would try to do is try to pull these people off the darknet site with his escrow and into a private sale where there is no escrow, so they can screw them. Because what are you going to do? There's nothing you can do in that case. So like someone, I saw a message like, "Oh, DM me," and we'll talk prices. I'd be like, "Dude, like why don't you make a listing? Why don't you pay the fee and become a vendor, bro? Like, why are you trying to get them off the site and out of escrow for?" And like, so I made a lot of enemies that way, but the people I made enemies with were there to screw people anyway. So I didn't care if they hated me. But the interesting thing was from kind of like social engineering perspective was kind of seeing like how people would react, because once people kind of know who you are and how you are, they kind of react different ways. So there might be a new person who hops on and like that guy's a scammer, so I call him out. And everyone knows that I do this because they've been on the site. And so I call him out and he flips out and say like he cusses at me, swears at me, whatever, tells me I don't know what I'm talking about. And I would see the community come to my aid because they knew, because like a lot of these people I had helped. So it was just crazy, man, like being in this anonymous environment and being there for a month and having, 5, 10 people. When I called the scammer out, the scammer tries coming to me, these 5, 10 people jump up and they're like, yo, back up. Two happy times. He helps people here. And, who the hell are you? Why don't you do what he said and go become a darknet vendor and go through escrow. So that's how I started
It's
out.
an
And then,
interesting like sociology part and economical part of it, where the market just filters out bad actors
right.
automatically.
Yep. Yep. I mean, they get scraps from the table. You're
Mhm.
always gonna have that noob who, hops on, gets fished, or, does that private deal because he thinks it's a great deal. And he
Get
just
scammed by
doesn't know.
someone somehow. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And but again, like that's part of that growth we were talking about earlier. Like once that guy gets screwed over, like he's probably never going to do it again. It's like I walk into this company and, I have a teddy bear and I have a delivery outfit on and I hand the secretary this teddy bear and I hand her this envelope, inside of an envelope with a note inside of it. And like, I'm like, oh, it's, delivery. And I walk out and she like opens it up and it's like, oh, like, when you have the teddy bear plugged into your Ethernet port and you go to your secret admirer's Facebook page, the teddy bear dances. And, there's some micro motherboard inside of there with, some malware. And as soon as she plugs it in, like it's, got a reverse listener. Like it's, I'm in your network now, thanks to Interpreter. And I'm pivoting through the LAN with Metasploit, thanks to your secretary. Now,
That was part one. Join us in 2 weeks as we continue this conversation with Sam. Until then, I wish you all the best, and I'll see you in the future.